Greetings, mortals. Today I tell you about my most used and most useful GM tools. Welcome to Tabletop Sandbox, where we talk about all things ttrpg. I am not a rapper, also known as Harrison Tar. Today I will be counting down my top 5 tools that I use as a game master to run my games. Without further ado, let's get into it. Number 5 is, of course, dice. I like to keep at least 2 sets and a couple extras, just in case I need to roll something big like fireball damage, or if I need to pass out d6s if I'm playing a Powered by the Apocalypse game. I like to keep my dice in a magnetically closed dice tray that is really nice, and it allows me to roll even if I'm somewhere without a flat surface, like on a bus, where I actually ran a game of Dungeon World one time. Number 4 is a 3-ring binder. This is something that I've only recently come to use as I've kind of dove into the hex crawl aspect of ttrpgs, and I'm really enjoying it. It's where I keep my maps, where I print out notes, where I print out random tables that I've formulated on my own or that I don't have the specific book for. It's just a really useful tool to keep all the full-size pages in, and I use both hole punched pages and sleeves to keep my things in. I also keep character sheets in the slip pockets in the front and back, and I have this handy dandy ruler and hole puncher, completely compact manual that I can use to punch pages even if I don't have like a full-size hole puncher are lying around, which I feel like most people don't. Next up, number 3 is map makers / generators. Now, it is very possible to run a game in theater of the mind where your players don't see any maps that you put in front of them. But I would still posit that maps are extremely useful for the game master to possess, so that they, at the very least, have a clear idea of the dungeon or just surrounding countryside that their players are walking through. I am, like I said, running a hex crawl at the moment, and my players don't get to see my hex map. It's for me. And that's partially because there's a chance of them getting lost, and that wouldn't make any sense if they had the map in front of them. And it's because, well, frankly, they don't need the map. They are doing fine just navigating by themselves, and that's really part of the fun. I've realized that this group I'm playing with really enjoys mapping out their travels and even the rooms of the dungeon as they make their way through them on their own grid paper, which I thought may have been really boring, but they seem to really love. And I should mention that one of these players has never played a TTRPG before, so really it's just a type of person that you can find and whether or not they're going to enjoy that style of play. Number 2, and I cannot stress how much I use these, random tables and generators. Now, one of my most used random table resources is Perilous Wilds. It has just about everything you might need. It has a great way to generate place and region names. It has a list of random people names in the back that you can roll. And it also has methods of generating creatures and dungeons on the fly and encounters and discoveries and things like that. It is extremely useful. It's all based on D12s and some D100s for place names and people names, but it is a incredible resource that I use every single time that I play. Another random generator, or you could call it an oracle, that I use is the Mythic GME, the Mythic Game Master Emulator. I use this for when I do solo play, and I also use it sparingly when I am running a game for other people. It is helpful that if something crops up that you don't have an immediate answer for, you can phrase it as a yes or no question, roll on the fate chart in the Game Master Emulator, and get an answer. Like it often tends to go with flipping a coin, that if you actually preferred one answer over the other, you're going to know the second you see the result on those dice, and you can just ignore what the dice say and pick what you actually wanted. Another random generator that I use every single session is the Universal NPC Emulator. I don't actually own the book for this, but there is an online resource that is absolutely phenomenal. It basically generates a random name out of cobbled together syllables, which that can be hit or miss. So sometimes you have to generate it a couple times or take aspects of the name that you like and use those rather than the whole thing or respell it. Then it lists a general descriptor of the NPC that is just 2 words, a adjective and a noun, and then it gives 3 motivations, and then it gives you a brief description of what that NPC might talk about. And a lot of this is very vague and up to interpretation, and I find that incredibly creatively inspiring. And finally, I have to shout out Donjon, which, you know, it sounds a whole lot like dungeon, which is this website that has all sorts of random generators for basically any system you could think of. Well, not every single system, but, you know, a lot of game systems. And it has random generators for just about anything. Treasure, NPCs, encounters, cities, place names, and dungeons. Before we get to my final resource, which I hope you won't find disappointing, let me give some honorable mentions, and bear with me because there are a lot of these. First, where I get my inspiration. I have to shout out D&D Beyond for allowing me to pick through the lore of the accumulated D&D rulebooks and all the different monsters they have, as well as the random encounter tables. I would never use the random encounter tables in Xanathar straight up, but they can be really useful to inspire your own much simpler random encounter tables. Also, Wikipedia. Wikipedia has just about everything when it comes to folklore and interesting historical facts and things like that. My next honorable mention is a virtual tabletop, or at least a platform where you can play the game with your friends online. I've used Roll20 and I really don't like the UI. So when I run my games, I use a virtual tabletop called Tabletop. It's really intuitive and simple. It doesn't have all the character sheets and rules incorporated into it, but it's really easy to edit, and I don't know. It's just, I like the way it works, and so that's what I use when I run games online. But it should be mentioned that Tabletop does not have an incorporated video call aspect to it, or even audio call, so I use Tabletop in tandem with Discord for video and audio purposes. And I've also run games completely in Discord if I'm doing theater of the mind. My last couple honorable mentions are, of course, the rulebook to the game I'm running. Right now, that's Cairn. And a DM screen. I have the one from Dungeons and Dragons, so that's what I use. Set up in front of you. Keep all those juicy secrets from your players. And finally, I have to shout out, of course, books and movies. I get a lot of my ideas from the media that I consume. And I actually have an entire video about stealing everything from the media that you love, but one of the most recent examples is I'm creating a campaign setting inspired heavily by Arthurian legend. So I've been reading Le Morte d'Arthur, and gosh, those nights, such chads. And now onto my number 1 GM tool, the one that I use practically every day, even if I'm not running a game. It is a notebook with gridded paper. This is an invaluable resource for me to record my ideas. It can be drawing maps, thanks to the grid paper, of dungeons or just general areas for the campaign. It can be recording charts or making up my own random tables, or it can just be used for recording notes in the session. And to go along with such an invaluable and maybe expected tool, you have to have a good pen. My personal favorite right now is the Sharpie S-Gel because it goes down dark, it dries quickly, and it doesn't bleed. Well, those are my top 5 GM tools that I use pretty much every time I run a game. Tell me what you thought. Did I leave anything out that you think is essential? Did I provide you with a good idea? Also, all of the online resources that I mentioned will be linked in the description below. If you thought this video was super hot fire, hit that like button and subscribe. And if you'd like me to go more in depth into any of the tools I use, leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and good night, mortals.